So he's 50 years of age. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got a lovely home, lovely kids. He's on 10 to 15 different medications. He sleeps terrible. He's drinking to deal with stress. The problem that person has, you're not going to be around for very long. How would you feel if another man walked your daughter down the aisle?
Ooh.
They're in that position where they are prioritising work over themselves. I think the message I'd like to share is that you can't do that forever. There will be a point where you burn out. We work with some very, very successful people, and I often ask them, could you imagine where you could get to if you actually looked after yourself?
What I'm noticing with the leaders that I'm working with is it's the least priority on their to-do list is to look after their own health. What do you think is causing that?
Really interesting question, and it's one that I've tried to work out myself.
Hello and welcome back to the Courageous Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Joanna Howes, and today's guest is someone transforming the way entrepreneurs show up in life and business, Cameron Harris. Cameron is the Managing Director of Truth Fitness, where he and his team have helped over 400 entrepreneurs lose weight, reclaim their health and feel like themselves again. So let's dive in. Cam, welcome to the show. It's amazing to have you on. I'm very excited about this because I know we're going to listen to a bit of your story, but I know you've got some amazing insights and advice on how we're going to help leaders to really look at their health and their well-being, ultimately to have wealth. But we're going to dig into that a little bit more later. I just want to know, what has been that courageous moment for you?
Well, thanks for inviting me onto the podcast just to start with. Looking back at, that entrepreneurial journey for me personally, there's been a few, like from personal life, but I think the one that really stands out is when we were based in the city of London and we had this beautiful private members club, and we was working from the gym and business was really good, and then COVID hit. So it's a very similar story for lots of us, right? And we lost, 85, 90% of our clientele overnight. So that was a real kind of a low moment where really kind of panicked and not knowing what we were going to do next. I think the courageous moment for me came about 18 months of being kind of down in the dumps and being very honest with you, not looking after myself, being maybe depressed probably if I was to look back on it. And the courageous moment came when I said to myself, right, I'm going to go online, I'm going to rebuild the business from scratch and just draw a line underneath it, draw a line in the sand and just go again. So I think that for me personally was a moment where I'm kind of proud of that really, if I was to look back on it. So courageous would be the right word, I'd say.
Yeah, this sounds like you dug deep and you found that resources that was in you to go, no, we can do this, we can find another way. And what has that led you to today? What have you created?
Well, we're 3-4 years after COVID now. So we're a global business. So we've got, about 100 clients we work with globally. So we work specifically with entrepreneurs mainly, but also senior executive leaders, as you mentioned earlier. And it's allowed us to build a business where we can be very, very flexible with our clients. So when you're based in a gym, and you've got, a CEO or a member of the board come into the city, the issue they've got is trains, they've got kids drop-offs, they've got all these different things that can happen. We've then come into that venue, like us here this morning, right? The train breaks down, we're all going to be late. When we moved online, the greatest benefit was that if that individual was late, or they had to be flexible with when their training was, or flexible with their kind of food plan, or things weren't going to plan, we can be very flexible. So I think the main benefit that our business offers now to our clients compared to before is an incredible level of flexibility. We even got everything on an app now.
Yeah.
So it's in the pocket. I think with executives and busy people, as I'm sure you know, because they are so busy, having that access to a coach and consultant whenever they need it, it's a lot more powerful than having to be in a space.
And have you particularly targeted entrepreneurs and leaders because they're not so good at looking after themselves and need that help? Is that a sort of pattern that you're noticing?
Yeah, I suppose if I took it back to why did we choose that type of person, I think that I'm my clients, I'm the kind of person that we work with. So kids, mortgage to pay, really busy lifestyle, struggling to fit workouts in, maybe not always on point with my food, mental health up and down a little bit, just your classic kind of entrepreneur and the kind of the rigors of business and the stresses that it brings. So we started to work with that person, that individual, that executive and owner, probably back in the day, because that was who I was trying to build a program around what would help me back in the day. But if we look at now, I think, yes, and we'll get onto this later, but I think there's a real cultural shift happening in the business world. And from our perspective, and what we've seen probably over 400 times now is that when you work with that busy entrepreneur, that busy executive, and you get them to transform their health, the impact is massive, because it's not just them, it's their senior team, it's then the team leaders, it's the rest of the team. So what we've seen is there's a real kind of benefit, not just to that individual, but it's a bit of a trickle down effect into the business. And maybe we'll talk about this later, but clearly we're going through an obesity crisis. And our approach to this is that how can we have the biggest impact on not only that individual, but their teams, their families. And what we've found is that if you can get the top of that tree, the leaders, people like that, to get into that headspace of health and not necessarily performance, I think that's the next part of things, but just health, just general health, it does have a real big impact on everybody around them. We've seen it so many times, really powerful.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. When I was in Melbourne, an agency, my CEO, Nick Garrett, I think it was around sort of 6 p.m. every day, his personal trainer would come in and you'd see him running around doing all his circuit, and he did it in the office because he knew he'd probably need to log on again afterwards. But that was a non-negotiable. We could not get in his diary at that time, even if there was a pitch or it was that, and you saw it. So it really did help you to visibly see that your CEO was demonstrating how important that fitness was in terms of how he showed up. So completely agree with what you're saying. What I'm noticing with the leaders that I'm working with is it's the least priority on their to-do list is to look after their own health. What do you think is causing that?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's a big one, and it's one that I've tried to work out myself. I think if I look at my own kind of journey and what happened to me in that position where I wasn't looking after myself, I wasn't prioritizing myself, I think for me at that stage it was around kind of survival. So what do I need to do to pay the mortgage? What do I need to do to feed the kids? What do I need to do to make sure that that part of my life is kind of looked after? So that made me push myself into more work and more hours and prioritizing the email and the phone call. The issue with that was that there comes a point where you just can't do it anymore. So, I mean, there'll be lots of people listening to this. They're in that position where they are prioritizing work over themselves. I think the message I'd like to share is that you can't do that forever. There will be a point where you burn out, whether you get depressed. We've had clients before in the past that have got really ill. So I'll give you an example. One of our clients, really senior solicitor in the city of London, flying to Japan, Asia, America, all from London, all over the place, and was prioritizing work, crazy hours, crazy schedule over himself. Now, he had a couple of warning signs. A couple of times we had heart palpitations, went to the doctor, had an ECG, said, look, we're not quite sure what's wrong with you, but we think you're tired. We think that you're exhausted and you're really fatigued, essentially. So, yeah, okay, no worries, sort it out. Nothing was done. 6 months later, took a flight to Japan, landed in Japan, went to hospital, and he had full-blown pneumonia. So he couldn't leave the hospital bed for 2 months in Japan. And the whole reason for that was because he wasn't prioritizing himself. So I think what I'd like to get across today is that if people can be more proactive in their health rather than reactive like that client was, and it's, to be honest with you, it's cost him a lot of money to fix that problem because he had to get personal trainers, nutritionists, people to look after his sleep, people to hold him accountable. He's worked with us for 6 years now. If he'd have been proactive, he probably wouldn't have needed us. So I think it's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer to it, but I do know that people should be proactive rather than wait for it to be at a point where it needs to be fixed.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode. I think one answer you gave there, which I hadn't thought about before, was the survival, how we go into survival mode. And what I see is people just go on to autopilot. So I talk a lot about the difference between autopilot and conscious thinking. And in this autopilot mode, we go into go, 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 deliver, to-do list, tick, 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 tick. But when we consciously think, it's like, well, no, actually, what's my morning routine? What's my 15-minute workout I've done today? What am I consciously putting into my body or consciously breathing to calm myself down before I go to my next meeting? And I also talk the difference between being an achiever and a high performer. And again, that achiever mode is go, 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 burn out. And underneath all of that, I've noticed is when we start getting into the territory of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, low self-belief, because you keep putting everybody else before you because maybe you don't like yourself enough. You don't love yourself, prioritize you, and recognize actually the only way you can help people is if you help yourself first. I think it's brilliant. I use it all the time. You know, the aeroplane, you've got to put your oxygen mask on before you put somebody else's on. And every time I work with a people pleaser, they're like, oh, I get it now. I do actually, because you're trying to please everybody, but actually you can't be there for anybody if you don't put your own oxygen mask on. So I think anyone listening now, because again, a bit like you said, you were this person, I was this person, I'd give everything to work, and I did burn out, and it was horrendous. And as you said, it takes a long time to come back versus being proactive to prevent it. But it's funny, isn't it? We do more as human beings to move away from pain than we do to move towards pleasure, which I think causes a lot of this reactive behaviour.
Absolutely. I think it's, I mean, I've been on both sides of the fence. I'm sure you have. And it just quickly, it blows my mind that we work with some very, very successful people. And I often ask them, could you imagine where you could get to if you actually looked after yourself? So you've got to, you're the CEO of this company, or you're managing director at Accenture. You've done so well, but you're in terrible shape. Like, your energy's through the floor. Just imagine if you had an extra 20%. So I think it's a really interesting concept, but I think personal experience and listening to people's stories, that's what helps me, is listen to people that are entrepreneur and talk about the highs and the lows and things they've learned, like podcasts like this. It really helps. It's helped me to be more proactive in other areas of my life. But I think it's a real interesting thing that people behave that way, but humans are humans, right? And until you can get to that position where you are being more proactive with your health, you won't ever feel the benefits. And then once I say to my clients sometimes when they just sign up, wish I had a crystal ball to show you how you're going to feel in 6 weeks' time, because you're just going to feel like a different human. You'll be 10, 20, 30% better than you feel now.
Yeah. And it's how can we allow that outcome and see that what's going to happen. So now you're summing this up really nicely in the work you're doing now, health and wealth. Can you just then, so I know you've shared a little bit, just then bring that to life for the listeners a bit more?
Yes, it's a concept that I don't think is particularly new, but us as a business, you really want to own that space. And, it's a place where if you look at, let's call it 50-year-old guy, right? He's got his entrepreneur, he's built this business for 20, 30 years, got it to a position where he's earning a lot of money. The business is worth, millions of pounds, and he sells that business. So financially, he's set up for life. Probably his kids are set up, right? Let's assume that his relationships are pretty good. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got a lovely home, lovely kids, but the health part is missing. So he's 50 years of age. He's on 10 to 15 different medications. He's got gout. He sleeps terrible. Still traveling all the time. He just is in a really bad position. He's drinking to deal with stress, right? The problem that person has, and this is me being totally honest, you're not going to be around for very long. When you're 50 and you're obese, you're stressed, you're not sleeping, you're eating really poorly, you're not going to be around for long. That's the reality of the human body. And I think, again, I don't want to shock people, but we only get one of these. You only get one chance at it. And I think people treat them like a dustbin.
No, they do.
They're going to get away with it, yeah.
There's a lovely saying someone said to me, because I used to have a terrible habit of always finishing my plate because I had this belief I didn't like waste. But then someone said to me, well, you're literally treating yourself like a bin. So you'd rather put it in your body than in a bin, and have your body then have loads and loads of pain because you don't like waste. So you are the waste bin. And I was like, oh. And that it gave me a whole new way to think about it. But something you were saying about, unfortunately, I lost my dad at 50. And a lot of that, he actually wasn't overweight, didn't drink and stuff, but it was the work stress. He was a chef. So crazy hours, shift hours, but pretty much being cooked his whole life, working the pressure of that. So I think there's some people also going, well, maybe I'm slim looking after myself, but stress can also be, and it's a horrible saying, but people say when you get into your 50s, it's a sniper zone, especially for men. It's awful, isn't it? Someone said that to me and I'm like,
true.
Awful. But
it's true.
And I say, I've got clients in that era at the moment, and also a lot of them going, I don't know what to do now. I've sold my business, got the money. What is this next phase of my life? And I'm going to take a punt here that actually getting physically fit, you're going to get mentally fit alongside that to actually start thinking about what does the next stage of my life look like. Have you come across that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two camps on that. And I've talked to lots and lots of business owners, senior executives, generally they've cracked the financial part, right? That part is done. There's two camps. One is, well, I'm 50. I'm just going to go and enjoy myself. I'm going to eat out twice a week. I'm going to go on nice weekends with my wife and go away with the boys on golf holidays. That's all great, but you're going to be lucky if you get 5 years of that, right? Then the other side of it, people go, oh shit, I'm in a really bad position here. Like I need to fix myself. And that's where we sit as a company, funny enough, is we're the people that come in and go, right, this is a year-long project. It's not going to be 6 weeks. This is a year-long project. And these are all the things that we need to change. When you are dealing with somebody like that, the old dogs, new tricks type thing is you're trying to change somebody who is probably drinking. Some people drink every day, like they're drinking scotches, bottles of wine, they're going out twice, 2-3 times a week for dinners. There's a lot of stuff to change. So I would say if you are in your 50s and you are that person I've just described, don't think about, 6 weeks is going to be a year-long project. And then what we need to do is chop that down, because I understand that's an overwhelming amount of time. Now, what I would say, because I'm sure we're going to get onto it anyway, but overcoming that initial inertia, the point where you're sitting down and going, what do I do here? That is the hardest part, just getting started. And if you do spend 10 minutes on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you spend your time, it's going to be the most confusing place on the planet. Nutrition, training, everyone thinks they're an expert, but only a very, very small amount of people are. And even the people that are experts argue about stuff. So I understand it from that person's point of view. Like, how do I get started? Where do I get my information from? Because if you just Google stuff, the Daily Mail's putting stuff out most days about tomatoes give you cancer and God knows what else, right? So I think you need to go to a trusted resource that has done this many times before, specifically with people like you, because, definitely in that position when you are in your 50s, it's not the time to go for the cheap option. It's the time to go, right, well, I've got the financial ability. Let's work with experts like yourself, like Truth Fitness, right?
Yeah, do it properly.
I think so. Yeah. You've got the money.
We deserve it.
Yeah, you spend so long pushing yourself into the floor. What are you going to do with the money? It does blow my mind. And some people still, it drives me crazy, but you're 50, you've got all this money, all this time in the world, and you still don't want to do it. You don't want to invest 10, 20, 30 grand into your health and fitness, but you've got a 35 grand watch on your wrist. It drives me crazy. But I think, again, there's a lot of things going on mentally. I think a lot of it is loss. You're having to lose potentially drinking 3 times a week and eating out all the time. And you can still do those things, but you just need to kind of, rein it in a little bit. The way I describe it to people is to say, you've had all of your fun coupons. You're 50 and you've been on the piss essentially since you were 30, probably 20. So you've got, at some point, you're going to have to rein it in, right? So.
And if anyone's sitting here listening going, but that sounds really dull, because there's someone particularly in my family I'm thinking about. I was brought up with a family, big, a lot of drinking. That's how they saw having a good time, was drinking and eating. That's how you socialised, and it was fun. And people go, well, hang on a minute, I've worked my life all this hard, and now what, getting to 50? And ideally, we're not saying people here only should start working out when they're 50. Ideally, you start when you're much, much younger. Yeah. But I think this is just a pattern we're seeing a lot of, is it's not now about reducing fun, or you've now got to be boring and all that. I think some people, as you said, just don't want to do it because they can't imagine the benefit. They can't see what their life could be like without that, because I think so much this comes down to the habits that we've got so ingrained.
Yeah.
What did you do, I think, from a personal point of view, to break some of the habits that you had?
Habits are really interesting, because I think just to maybe articulate it for people that are listening to this that don't have time, because obviously we talk about that 50-year-old man or woman that's just sold their business, right? So we're talking about a very, very small percentage of people. I know a lot of your listeners are senior executives, people in leadership roles, so their time is still very squeezed. It's very difficult. I think habits are the first thing that people can look at, because it doesn't take you any more time to optimize your habits. If you're looking at your daily habits, what I'd recommend people do is make a list of all the things that you do every day. So whether it's, I get up at 7 a.m. and then I have a croissant, then I run to the train station, then I get a cab, right? Just list everything out. And then what I'd say is to get the top 3 to 5 of those daily habits that are having the biggest negative impact on your health. Now, obviously, smoking and drinking will be up there, of course, but things like getting up a little bit too late, having lunch meetings rather than breakfast meetings, all these different bits and bobs, right? And if you can list out the top two, three, maybe even five, and flip those into the positive. And what happens is it doesn't take you any more time to fix those problems. You haven't got to go to the gym, haven't got to change what you're eating, you're just changing your habits. To give you an example, imagine you get up at 7 a.m, you're running around, you're really late, so you either put a bit of toast in your mouth or grab a croissant. You then get to the train station, you have a large latte with all syrupy stuff in it, whatever people have, get on the train, and then the other end of the train, you're late, so you jump in a cab. That morning routine, I know it's not specifically a routine because a lot of people online are talking about ice baths and all this nonsense, which anyone that actually in the real world running a business hasn't got the time for that stuff. So if you just look at that as a daily routine, right, what can we change? Well, let's get up 10 minutes early. I can't get up to 10 minutes early. I'm too tired. Why too tired? Because I drink a bottle of red wine every night. Bingo. Now we're starting to make some physical changes. So why don't you try and have half a bottle of red wine? Okay. Stop at 8:30 p.m. Have a pint of water before you get up and force yourself to get up at 10 to 7. And let's just start making small incremental changes. And that hasn't taken you much more time. But I think the big issue here is some people aren't willing to accept that they need to make that change to see changes. I think social media sells people the lie of you can get all these great things over here, you can feel amazing, we haven't got to change anything. And that's not reality. You're here today doing this. It's hard work and you're doing it because there's a benefit to it. So I think people need to be more honest with themselves and say, if I want this stuff over there, I'm going to have to change some stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's holding that mirror up. You reminded me of someone who was talking to me the other week. I won't name names because they won't know them soon. But it's like, saying, well, I'm trying to lose weight, but I can't lose weight. And then like 3 hours later, they were just telling me, it's really bad. Like I have a bag of crisps with my glass of wine before dinner, and I have a rich tea biscuit with my tea before I go to bed. And before I know it, I'm like, you haven't changed any of your habits. You're still doing all these little things every day that are piling the calories on. But they're saying, nothing's changing. I'm having salad for dinner, but they're not being honest with all the little things they're having in between. I think sometimes we choose not to see it. We don't want to, because then we do have to accept we need to change. But I couldn't agree with more on these little changes. I decided to join the 5 a.m. club. I know some people are for it, some people are against. Best thing I ever did. But I did it gradually. So I used to get up at 6, so it wasn't too bad. But it was 5:45, then it was 5:30, and then eventually I got to 5 a.m. Now I wake up without an alarm. It's just now part of my norm, and it's the best thing I've ever done. So like before I came here, I did an hour's workout at home, and then someone came to the gym. And it says, I think something you talk about is you've got to take responsibility for your energy. And I think I couldn't turn up here. It's like what your standards are. I'm not going to show up here with you today when you've given me your time being sluggish, not feeling good, not feeling alert, not being able to do the interview, because that's one of my standards I want to have for you. And I think in the realms of leadership, if you've chosen to be a leader or an entrepreneur that's then got people working into them, there's such a responsibility in how you choose to show up, because you are impacting those people's lives. Have you seen anyone be able to do this because actually they've needed to make their why about others more than themselves, and that's actually helped them to take the action first because they've seen a bigger picture?
Kids
right,
would be a massive one. I mean, there's some kind of tools that I use in consultations. One of them I use is, how would you feel if another man walked your daughter down the aisle? And it cuts right through all the bullshit. And it's like, we're not talking about going goosebumps, that's it.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just messing around here. This is real life stuff. And unfortunately, I've seen lots of people that have gone the other way and haven't taken ownership. At the end of the day, if you can't knock a couple of bottles of wine on the head per week and get yourself out for some walks and drink a bit more water and maybe take a couple of magnesiums before bed, if you can't do that for yourself, then look your children in the eye and ask them, how would you feel if I was to go down this path of ill health? And the reality is that none of us can hide from it. We're all going to die. And I know there's lots of people out there that say, yeah, well, my nan smoked till she was 99 and, she did marathons. That's an exception to the rule. Most people, they're going to have problems if they don't look after their lifestyle and look after themselves. And the way I describe it is that if you can be proactive in your health, you're giving yourself the biggest chance of winning the lottery. And the lottery for me is getting to 8 years of age, having a really healthy, long life, being able to play with your grandkids, take them on holiday, still play golf if you play golf, do sailing if you want to do sailing, just be able to do all the stuff that you want to do right up until the end, rather than being that person at 60 that's got gout and can't walk and it's agony all the time. And you're going to miss so much stuff. And I think I'm personally, I'm only 39 in August, right? But I think about death quite a lot. And I want to make sure that as much as I can, everything I'm doing is positive. It's always doing something. And I'm human, right? I do stuff that's bad sometimes, but as much as I can, do stuff that my kids would be proud of and do stuff that's going to move me closer to a better version. I think that we should all be trying to do that, really. But the difficult part is bridging that gap between that person that doesn't know what to do and getting them to get into that mindset. But it's tough.
I suppose what you're doing there with, imagine someone else walking your daughter down the aisle, is you're trying to get them to envision their future self, and which might not be here, or what is that future self in terms of who you want to become. And I think there was a study in high performance, as the highest performers in the world know who they want to become, and they do a habit every single day that moves them to become that person. So I know we said it, yes, in a way that links then to, is your personal performance of how you're going to show up. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode. I was just curious, when you said about you think about death a lot, where has that come from for you? How has that become a motivator or a driver or a conscious thing for you?
It's a brilliant question. My dad was older when he had me. He was about 55, something like that. So I think, as a kid, people used to stop us in the street or say hello and say, "Oh, it's your granddad," all the time. So I think having an older dad, and he battled Alzheimer's for 15 years. He died 2 years ago now. He was 86, something like that. So really, I didn't feel like I got a lot of quality years with him. So I think ill health and death has been around me and my sister personally for quite a long time. So I think that proactivity around, health and being the best version of myself probably comes from that. And a lot of the stuff we do at True Fitness probably is from that. My dad, for example, used to work very early, just around the corner here in Hackney. Used to have really early mornings, a lot of sleep, always stressing out about money, really not looking after himself. He used to have a really sugary diet, didn't used to work out, all the kind of wasn't a big drinker, but all the kind of common triggers that your body's looking for to move you into ill health. And that Alzheimer's that he got, he was on a plethora of drugs, statins and warfarin, all types of stuff, had atrial fibrillation, all your classic kind of markers for ill health. So I think a lot of what I do and what we've built at True Fitness is around people not seeing that, because, what I'm saying, do you want to see another man walk your daughter down the aisle? I'm saying it because I walked my wife down the aisle without a dad. So I kind of, it's coming from a place of, this is the reality of your situation. It's quite difficult because I think you made a really great point earlier, is that people are in denial. So you're living in a river in Africa at the moment, you are in denial, right? You're completely in denial about the fact that you're not looking after yourself. And at some point in time, you're going to get a punch in the face that's going to wake you up. And that's back to that reactive thing we spoke about earlier. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite a deep reason for me.
Big driver for you.
Yeah.
And I think, as I lost my dad young as well. And I think having those things, I think, for people maybe who haven't had that punch in the face yet, it's easy to stay in those habits. And I'm sort of at an age now where, very sadly, a few friends now have got terminal illnesses and things. And just thinking about, and I listened to a podcast yesterday with Simon Sinek, this lady who had recovered from breast cancer, but she has this advice of live as if you've only got 2 years left to live. Anything less than that, you're probably going to be crazy and spend all your money and quit your job and go traveling. And any more than that just doesn't give you that motivation and drive. Apparently 2 years is this sweet spot to think about, if I only had 2 years left, how do I want to feel? How do I want to be? What do I want to do? And some people might say, well, if I've only got 2 years, I'm not going to spend it in the gym or getting fit or anything. But then you never know. Bear in mind, this is a fictitious. I do struggle with some words. Fictitious deadline just think then actually you might, and I know one of my friends has looked after herself so well, she has bought herself more time. And I think for you, something it's just reminded we spoke about is where you get angry with the social media world and they're so focused on image and aesthetics versus I know you're very passionate about energy, resilience, your presence. How are you using your message or on social and stuff like that to get people to hear a different story and actually to realise it's not just about image?
Yeah, it's difficult because there's a lot of noise out there. I mean, I'd struggle to think of many industries that are noisier than health and fitness industry. And unfortunately, it's kind of being led by influencers who generally, I mean, I don't spend much time on Instagram. I don't have it. In fact, I've deleted all that stuff I can't stand it. Apart from LinkedIn, which I use for business, which I quite like as a platform. It's difficult to get your message out there because one of the things that I talk about all the time is that people in my space say, yeah, but all you got to do is eat less and move more. It's the biggest oversimplification I've ever heard in my life. It's just you're kind of bringing that complex, the guy we spoke about, the 55-year-old, right? You're bringing that complex person, that person needs a holistic approach to their health and well-being, right? And you're distilling it down to eat less and move more. It's just ridiculous. So I think for us as a business, we like to work with people that are more interested in health and longevity. And the next part of that puzzle is potentially performance, which we haven't spoken about. But if you can't sort those building blocks out, your sleep, your exercise, hydration, steps, all those kind of key factors, if you can't fix those, you can't get into performance. But I think, the chances of most people we work with getting a shredded six-pack, it's just, A, it's probably never going to happen because of their lifestyle, and B, do you really care? So there's lots of companies out there that will get you, put funny lights up and make you oil you up with all dark stuff to make you look shredded, but who gives a shit? Like, why does that matter? Like, I'd rather be with my kids and be strong and healthy and be able to throw them up in the air than show everyone how clever I am to have a six-pack.
Good point. And how often are you walking around with your top off anyway?
I find a lot of it abhorrent, like how I've literally been in gyms where personal trainers are more interested in their image in the mirror than who they're working with. And I think my industry is flooded with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't like it.
Fair play. And you've mentioned performance a couple of times. What is it you talk about when it comes to performance?
Yeah, so again, I think it comes back down to the fundamentals. I think a lot of people we work with, they need to get their health sorted first, those basics. So we have sleep, there's habits, there's food, there's training, movement as well. Once those are all in place, then your health starts to be in a much better position. And performance naturally starts to happen. So I'll give you a quick example. If we're working with someone on their health and making sure they're kind of in a better position, their energy bar, so if it's out of 100, this is 100, which is amazing. This is 1, which is really bad. They're sitting down at 20, 30%, right? Once you get them into those good habits and they're training, working out, that'll be up to maybe 50 or 60%. Now, performance for us is that last 30%, digging into that. Now, that comes into really actually getting strong. Because I think a lot of people, especially business owners that are very ego-driven, say things to me like, oh, I'm strong, or, oh, I'm quite fit. It's like, but compared to what? A 90-year-old person, what are you talking about? Oh yeah, I walk all the time. That's my exercise. Well, that's great, but walking is a basic human thing that you do. It's not really working out. So I think people need to kind of, get the basics right. Once you've got the basics right, then you can start to build into more advanced nutrition. Like you mentioned, intermittent fasting, getting into more supplementation, getting into kind of more tips and tricks around sleep, getting yourself strong, making yourself conditioned. And then from a performance perspective, you're going to be on point. Your energy is going to be through the roof. You're going to feel more vibrant. You're going to come across more articulate rather than some of these people. I look at them come to meetings and see them in the mornings. They look like they've been dragged through a hedge backwards. So I think performance is the second part of the journey, but most of our guys need to sort the first bit first.
And I think that's probably a good point. I think a lot of leaders and business owners don't have much patience. So they want to jump straight into this performance zone. And when they see how much work they've got to do to get to the performance zone, it's like, as you said, it feels a bit overwhelming. Because the weird thing is, we'll commit all the hours, we'll commit to our working day, but we won't do that commitment for ourselves or go through that patience. It's funny, isn't it? How what we are willing to do and not willing to do. But can you actually measure it then? So if people are doing this year, they can actually see it, they can measure their progress. You've got this energy bar, they can see how their energy is increasing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just back to your first point about, successful people wanting to get to point Z and skip all this stuff, right? So we see all the time, people are really successful entrepreneurs or executives, right? They're very, very driven people. They're nothing gets in their way, right, when it comes to being successful. But then they try and apply that to health and fitness, and where they are successfully from their business perspective, it's taken them 20 years to get there, but they want to get to that point in fitness within 6 weeks. They buy a Whoop band, they're buying different supplements, they've got red light stuff. It's like, mate, you're not even sleeping yet and you're drinking 3 times a week. So I think that's a common trait that I see. We call it headbutting the horizon. They're trying to get to the point. It's like, well, you can't do that. You can't build all that. There's not enough runway, right? So I think that's the first point I make.
Just also really curious how this then has impacted you and you learning all your patience. If you look back to your younger self, what advice would you now, because I think you've learned and grown from what I hear so much with your journey, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think just to say it's all going to be okay. I think as a kid, even now, like, I still think that lots have had trauma as a kid, but I think a lot of that, not having a father figure as well, I think it didn't give me that rock, that kind of solid base to kind of bounce off the old man, right? So I think just telling myself that you've got loads of time and it's all going to be right. I think when I kind of went from, being a boy to being a man, I wanted to get everything, just like we spoke about, really, really quickly. And then the pressures and the timelines I put on myself, I was that guy that said, right, when I'm 28, I'm going to be married. And when I'm 29, I'm going to have kids. I'm going to have a house. It's like this I don't know where it came from, this artificial timelines that I placed to myself. And actually caused me a lot of mental health issues because, unbeknownst to me, there was lots of stuff that I hadn't fixed. Back to the basics we spoke about earlier. There's lots of trauma and stuff I hadn't worked through. But yeah, I'm trying to do this thing over here and it wasn't any good. So I think the advice I give myself is, it's all going to be okay. Just take it a bit slow, enjoy the ride a little bit. And, as difficult as that is, right? But yeah, I think that's the advice I give myself.
I think it's brilliant advice. It resonated with me. I think it would resonate with a lot of people is, why do we need to rush all this stuff? And why do we set these life deadlines? And whoever said that that's what we had to do at certain ages, but we've all decided to follow it. And it's like, do we?
Yeah, where did it come from?
Can we just make our own path, please? And I'm on a big mission this summer myself to just go, actually, what is the path I want to be on? Yeah. And stop hitchhiking onto other people's paths. Just be on your own and know where you want to go. And you've still got plenty of time to drive down that path and get where you want to get to. Before we close, is there anything you'd like to reinforce or anything we've missed? I
think just that message of, proactivity rather than reactivity. I think people listen to this and, just spend, obviously you can use AI now, right? Just ask AI about the human body and ask about what are the common issues that come about if I don't sleep properly, if I do drink alcohol 4 times a week. Just start to learn a bit more about the human body and about yourself and your situation. And I think most people will get a bit of a reality check and go, right, maybe I should be proactive rather than waiting for, and I've seen this lots of times, the meeting with the doctor where people walk out and they want to cry.
Yeah. And then you don't ever want to say, I wish, if only, and not do those language. And I think what was wonderful, the advice that's really stuck with me is that thing of just look at what you do in the morning and just what's 1 or 2% of those habits you can change that coffee for a healthy smoothie. What are those little things that can actually set your day up well? I say it doesn't have to be complete reinvention turned on its head. There are small things that you can take control of every day. And if people do want to find out more about you, and if they do want then that accountability and that support over the next year to do it, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yes, if they go on LinkedIn, probably that's where we're most active. Okay. Just search Cameron Harris Truth Fitness, or you can Google Truth Fitness and we're truthfitness.co.uk.
Thank you so much. And thank you for trying to break the noise of what people are doing in health and fitness and also find something that is actually going to suit the lifestyle that leaders and entrepreneurs have, because I think there's just too much out there that they could do but isn't going to marry the lifestyle that they're trying to lead. So with all the people I work with, I can see they need the support that you're offering. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's been brilliant. And thank you for everyone listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. If you've been enjoying the Courageous Leaders podcast, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us keep creating quality content and reaching more leaders like you who are ready to grow and make a real impact. We fund this podcast ourselves, so every subscription truly makes a difference and allows us to support courageous leaders like you. Thank you for being part of the journey.